Hello and welcome back to the Nikon D850 live stream event. I'm your host Melissa New, and this is the exploring video features of the Nikon D850. And before I introduce you to these handsome fellas to my left, I'm so thrilled that you guys at home can go to facebook.com/NikonUSA, upload or submit your questions. We're so excited that this is live, and we're actually taking your questions from home about all the exciting features of the Nikon D850. So without further ado, gentlemen, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent. We're so excited. Steve Heiner, Senior Technical Manager with Nikon. We also have two very talented Nikon ambassadors, Lucas Gilman and Corey Rich. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Our pleasure.
It's awesome. Well, first of all, we need to know the features. Like, Steve, you've got to give us the lowdown. Like, give us like a high-level top features for videographers and filmmakers.
You know, for all of those who were watching the first segment, I mean, you guys talked a lot about all of the great photography, still photography features of this camera. These guys both come from still photography backgrounds too, so we're going to talk how those two parts of this camera are married together. The camera now has 4K UHD with the full width of the frame being available. Lindsay talked about the 45.7 megapixel sensor. It's an FX format sensor. We use the entire frame in order to gather our 4K UHD footage. We've got some great features built in about time-lapse that I know we'll talk about with these guys because I've used this feature already. But a lot of the great features that were in previous cameras are carried over to this camera also with some great additions. But this is truly a multimedia creation tool. This can do it all. Still photography, advanced time-lapse operation, and full 4K UHD video as well. So we're very excited about this camera.
I mean, I've got two guys like nodding their head. Is that like out of excitement nodding your head?
100%, yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited to really dive in. I mean, you guys had the camera, both of you shot two completely different, projects with this camera. So I'm really excited to dive into that. And first, I mean, Corey, let me go to you. You touched on the 4K. Talk to me about your shoot and how 4K really helped out your shoot.
You know, when Nikon called to basically try to put the camera in my hands and Lucas's hands so that we could actually have a forum like this, talk about what the D850, how it responded in our hands. And I think first and foremost, it was just so easy to pull it out of the box and turn it on, and it was intuitive. All of the same buttons and control configurations that the D5, the flagship camera, and the D500. So same position of buttons, which makes it just easy. It's intuitive.
Yeah.
But 4K is important. I'm a professional filmmaker, and so my clients want 4K video. I mean, everyone is trying to future-proof what they're shooting, and so 4K is important. And I think, that's one of those realities of whether you're shooting for a high-end client or whether you're shooting something for yourself. You want a future-proof. You want the highest quality image, be it still or video, available, and that's the D850 right now.
That's so exciting. Did you want to touch on anything, Lucas, about the 4K?
Yeah, having the full frame is absolutely amazing to be able to now take advantage of these beautiful Nikkor wide-angle lenses, but inversely, as I also shoot stills and video and kind of like a one-man band in a lot of senses, having the DX mode and being able to shoot 4K as well, and having, for instance, I shoot with the 80-400 AFS lens a lot, being able to shoot that in the video mode for surfing and still get 4K with a 1.5 crop, which allows me to have relatively like a 600 millimeter lens. So not only do I have the best of both worlds, having everything being wide, my wide angle lenses being there, but having that long lens as well is super exciting for me.
Well, what's great about you two is that you both shot two completely different things. So I can't wait to touch on what features really stuck out to you. But Corey, yours was very personal. Like, you did a very personal video shoot. Do you want to kind of set us up for what?
Sure. I think it's true of many filmmakers and photographers. The nature of our work puts us on the road, and I travel a lot. And this year has been an extraordinary amount of travel. I think I've flown 150,000 miles this year, and we're halfway through the year, a little over halfway through the year. And when it came time to kind of dream up a small project, I thought, gosh, it would be ideal to stay home. I just really wanted to be home. And the reality is, filmmaking and photography, it's really about capturing moments of the people that you care most about, right? It's these moments in life, and that, of course, for me is my friends, my wife and my daughter, my friends and family, really. And so I sort of, for a week while I had the D850 in my hands, I would sort of go into work an hour late, and I would try to pick my daughter up at school, and I would just try to really record the moments as they unfolded in our house. Whether that was a barbecue or whether it was my daughter, brushing her teeth, I just really tried to capitalize on those moments. And that became a short film that allowed me to really use the camera, and it's entitled Home.
And that's something we actually get to see today, correct?
Correct.
Awesome.
I hope so.
So yeah, let's definitely check that out. To set it up, you had the Nikon D850, and what lens? Did you have anything else?
That's a really important point that you're making, or question. I think sometimes people believe if you're shooting high-end video, professional video using a DSLR camera, you take the camera and then you start adding stuff onto it, cages and microphones and monitors and follow focus rigs. And I wanted to keep this really simple. I wanted it to be about the core content, which was documenting my family, documenting it, a week at home. And so I kept it simple, and this camera allows you to do that. It was one 50mm lens and the camera, no external microphones, no external monitors. And that's partly possible because of the tiltable screen right now. I mean, that's a huge feature. For me as a filmmaker, that excited me. It was incredibly exciting because historically with a DSLR, the LCD screen is on the back, and if you want to put the camera low on the ground, you're then laying on your belly, with your head cockeyed to see what the camera is seeing, or you're using an external monitor. Yeah. And now with the D850, you just tilt the screen up and you can put the camera on the ground. If you want to hold the camera high, you tilt the screen down. And so it's really, it seems so obvious and so simple, but it really changes the game for filmmakers who want to move light and fast.
Okay, well, I'm excited. Can we check it out?
Sure.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Let's roll this.
This is where I live. It's our home. 4 of us live here, my wife Marina, my daughter Layla, and our dog Preta. I'm gonna warn you right now, this is a home movie. I shot it on one camera, 50mm lens. It's all handheld, but that's the thing. I like it that way. It's purely about moments. I love that everyone's guard is down and they're just being themselves.
Aww. Look at this one's dress.
I spend most of my year traveling the world as a professional filmmaker, yet when I'm home, I pick up the same camera to document the most important moments of my lifetime with my friends and family. This is our time capsule. I leave a camera on our kitchen counter 24/7 so I can pick it up anytime and start shooting. We have tons of friends and family passing through. Our dinners are big, they feel like parties. Every evening is filled with energy and passion. That's what I want Layla to see. I wish these moments could last forever. We lose these tender memories a week later, a month later, a year later. Not just the big barbecues, but the everyday moments. Layla brushing her teeth, running through the woods, playing with her friends, reading books with her grandparents. Marina and Layla cooking, making art, playing music. Preta doing what she does best, sleeping. These home movies preserve all of those special times my brain can't. Out on assignment, I usually get people to do what I need for the shot, but not at home. Layla's not afraid to turn her head or put her hand up in front of the lens. I think she thinks it's entertaining.
Papa, stop.
But I think she understands what I do. It's my job and my passion. I know that most of the footage that I shoot at home will never see the light of day, that it'll mostly just stack up on hard drives. But 20 years from now, Layla will get to see some of these moments at her wedding. Grandparents, friends, our dog. Sometimes when I'm looking at the back of the camera, I tear up because I'm watching life and time unfold in front of me. I know it's a bit cliche to say, but for me, there's really no place like home.
Oh, Corey. Steve, are you crying?
That's a great
Do I
piece. That
do I
really
see
is.
tears over there?
Yes, it does. It gets me choked up.
Oh my goodness.
I like
No,
it. Thank you,
as a
guys.
mom, it hits home so much to me. And I know that there were some audio glitches there, and we apologize about that, folks. I think the live stream definitely had a few issues there. But where can people find that film?
You know, it is, I believe it is posted on my blog, so you can simply go to coryrich.com and click on blog.
Okay.
And it should play with clean audio there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. So you didn't produce it like that.
No.
No, I love that. I love, and there's a few things that I really want to touch on. You know, there's probably my favorite clip in there, amongst others, is that slow motion. I mean, she had that grass coming out of her mouth. And Steve, I would love for you to talk about the slow motion, like the features of that.
That's one of the new features of this camera. For full HD, for 1080 recording, we can actually record up to 120 frames per second, which is recorded in the camera and then played back at 24p. So when it comes out of the camera, you can actually see that effect immediately on the back screen. In fact, I know Corey didn't even realize that he could do this until he got the camera and shot that one scene. And then I think regretted ultimately
Oh,
he
you
didn't shoot some
did?
more.
Really true. It was the end of shooting. It was sort of, you know, a few mornings, a few evenings, and then a day that I spent with my daughter and wife at home, and we went hiking, and I shot that clip at 120, played it back in the
And
camera.
you're like,
Well, I
what?
just had this aha moment where I thought, why didn't I shoot the whole piece in slow motion? But
It's tempting because it's a
it's
beautiful,
incredible.
very heroic kind of slow motion.
It
yeah.
is. But I can see how that tilt screen really came in handy, especially for children and the angles that you had to get out.
yeah, you know, I think, I mean, I always joke that shooting my daughter, whether it's still photos or video, some of it is actually making her believe you're not shooting, right? So
Yeah.
she says, you know, papai, that's my daughter speaks Portuguese to my wife, and she says, papai, which is dad, I want play with me. And so of course I have the tilt screen. She thinks I'm no longer filming, but I'm actually kind of looking down while I'm reaching. And so it's also a great tool for shooting when your daughter doesn't believe you're still shooting.
Well, and
But
she's just darling. What did she think when you showed her that film?
you know, that's a really funny question. My daughter loved it, but I think I was bringing her into the office while we were editing the piece. But I shared the link with one of the dads of one of her little girlfriends, and he sat his daughter down and he showed it to her, and 2 minutes and 13 seconds later, she said, "That's it?"
That's exactly what you want to hear as a creator.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, the emotion in that is just incredible. And I know your work, Corey. I mean, you are out on these crazy adventures, and this was, you know, this is something that people can do at home, but this camera, the Nikon D850, isn't, I mean, the capabilities are endless, right, Steve? I mean, can you touch on some of the features
It really
as well?
is. I mean, it's a camera that can be used at home in a very comfortable environment, but it's also built like our flagship cameras. It's very well weather sealed all around the camera. We even took the built-in flash off of the top of it to help protect it from water or moisture getting into the camera. All of the critical joints are O-ring sealed, very much to the same level as our benchmark or our flagship D5 camera is. So they're very tough cameras, all magnesium alloy body, very well built, so it can withstand the rigors that these guys put it through very easily without
Wow.
trouble.
I think that's what's so interesting, you know, for me about the D850 is this will be the same camera that I use for the biggest jobs of my career, professionally shooting video, but it's also the ultimate tool for shooting a home movie. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just the way it's built, the resolution, the functionality, the form factor. And, you know, I think one thing that I didn't mention, and I think it speaks to a video that like I just shot and played, it's the onboard microphone, the built-in microphone in this camera is extraordinary. And Steve can speak more technically to why that is, but there was a huge step up from the D810, this microphone, the sound quality. In post, I found myself constantly asking myself, should I sound up this scene? Because there was virtually great audio.
Well, and
all the
that's what I
time.
was going to ask you, is the sound and the color grading. Did you do anything to the?
Yeah, the color also blew me away. I mean, the footage that we just watched, that's straight out of camera. There's no color grade applied. it's really a remarkable camera in terms of quality of image straight out of the camera. And I think for most passionate filmmakers or professional filmmakers, we want to spend our time focused on storytelling, on capturing moments, not dealing with the technical aspects of tweaking the camera. And this camera did a lot of that heavy lifting for me. I mean, and that's which allowed me to be spending intimate time capturing special moments with my family and friends. And so it's you know, I always say with each generation of new camera, I want the camera to do more for me, and this camera did more than any other camera to make my job easier.
Oh, definitely. So you can focus on the emotion and the.
That's right.
Steve, what about the audio? Were there huge improvements there?
Yeah, there are always improvements being made to the audio recording in the camera. Even now, because we took the flash off, the microphone placement is different, so that can help. Excuse me, in picking up better, clearer audio. But we've also built in an audio attenuator in this camera that we have not in other cameras that helps manage those sort of moments where overmodulation can occur so that you don't get serious spikes in your audio as well.
Yes.
You have manual control over it. You can put it in an automatic mode as well. Plus there's of course the as you would expect, a microphone input jack, headphone out, so you can monitor your audio as well. And this can be incorporated into a much larger sort of production, or it can be as simple as like Corey was using it, just completely without any accessories too. And I was going to speak to kind of what Corey was talking about. There's always been this old adage that you'd fix it in post in filmmaking, where, you know, I think that what he was talking about now, we've applied picture control, a flat picture control that can eke the most out of this sensor if one intends to do a fair amount of post-production. But the beauty of this, and especially coming from a still photography background like these guys come from, they know they can apply those same picture controls, of which they have a tremendous amount of manual control over each and every parameter of how the picture is rendered. Apply those same picture controls, of which they have a tremendous amount of manual control over each and every parameter of how the picture is rendered. So everything from monochrome output to super vivid color to very muted color. We've even got now a brand new automatic picture control, so that if you don't want to have to set all that manually and do it all automatic, you can do that as well for people who want to just go into autopilot mode. So there's a tremendous amount you can do in the camera that can affect the output so that it can be as simple as just bypassing the color grade or other aspects. So it's,
you know, there's oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one thing I was going to ask was, you shot at super shallow depth of field. Did you use the built-in focus peaking?
Yeah,
that was, I mean, it was beautiful, like a 50 and like, you know, very cinematic.
You know, it used to be we both come from the still photography world, and, you know, the guys that shot photos 30 years ago, the big claim was who could, you know, manually focus the best.
Yeah.
But it is a lost art. And with this camera, there's something called focus peaking. And in video, almost all video is shot in manual. And what focus peaking does is it highlights your subject that's in focus. You can choose the color. And so I definitely had a higher success ratio of in-focus shots because of the focus peaking when I was shooting in full HD.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Lucas.
but it
Lucas
really
needs to sit over here. He's got the good questions.
No, you're doing a great job.
No, I think that's really important. And then I think you touched on that, the full frame with all of the different lenses that you can utilize. For
yeah,
that.
that's a big, you know, Nikon, one of the great things about Nikon is they've committed to allowing all f-mount lenses to fit on this camera. So that means whether it's my brand new Nikon 50mm 1.4, which is what I shot most of this video with, or I shoot a lot of moving pictures, so I'm a collector of old Nikon lenses, you know, made 40, 30 years ago. They still fit on the D850. And that is hugely advantageous. And because we're shooting in 4K full frame, when I put a 24mm lens on that camera, I'm getting a 24mm perspective. It's the same perspective that I got when shooting film as a still photographer, and so that it allows you to put less energy into kind of compensating or calculating for what focal length the camera will be seeing. When you put a 24 on, you get a 24. When you put a 35 on, you get a
That's
35.
huge.
Yeah,
That's
that's
huge.
right. It's super exciting to have this
That's
in a
awesome.
DSLR shooting.
And now we're going to put Lucas in the hot seat. We've kept him quiet for too long. Lucas, you do some phenomenal time lapse, and I can't wait. Steve, will you give us just a quick, you know, the 4K
Sure.
and the 8K, touch on those, and then I can't wait to see what Lucas has for us.
Yeah, I don't want to steal any of Lucas's thunder too, because I know he wants to talk about it. But
It's always mine.
But this camera, we've had an interval timer in our cameras for forever, it seems. And now in this particular camera, I've dubbed this the time-lapse machine, because it honestly does offer such a variety, and it has so many levels of operation in the time-lapse mode. You can shoot in-camera 4K UHD resolution time-lapses that are finished as a finished file. You can do the same thing with full HD files, can also be recorded in camera and delivered as a finished movie file, so that you don't have to do any post-production on those. But we also, by virtue of the overall resolution of the sensor in this camera being as high as it is, we can take advantage of that resolution, which is over 8,000 pixels, 8,200 pixels plus. Wow. So we can actually take the interval timer option that's in the camera, produce individual still images, and then once those are downloaded, you can apply any number of different types of third-party software to create an 8K time-lapse. But 8K time-lapses, just for those who might have been confused by this, cannot be created in the camera as a finished movie file, but you can create all of the still images in the sequence that you want. And in fact, we've got a new filing system in the time-lapse menu that allows you to create a brand new folder automatically for every sequence that you start, and it will renumber and start from 0 for every sequence. So it's really easy to point your third-party time-lapse creation software right at that folder and have it do its job.
That's incredible. Lucas, you received the Nikon D850, and you were able to go where? Can you kind of set us up for this shoot?
I will. So while Corey was in Lake Tahoe having barbecues with his family and hanging out with his family, I also travel many miles every year. And but one of my favorite places in the world is Iceland. It just has such extreme landscapes. But not only does it have extreme landscapes, it has extreme weather. And with that weather, there's lots of moving clouds, and there's lots of variation in exposures. There's black rocks and bright skies. And I really wanted to see, you know, with any product I go out in the field with, I want to see what it'll do. So that's part of the reason why I chose Iceland, because of these extreme, not only extreme weather and being able to do the time lapse to show motion, but also to really see what that dynamic range would be. Let's go ahead and roll it, because I'm going to talk through the video on this. So.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's no audio on this one, so I'd love to hear your thoughts as this video is playing. Go ahead and roll it, guys.
So part of the task was, and with these time lapses, we go out every day, and for each one of these sequences, we're there 2 to 3 hours, basically taking many images and basically compressing that time. As you can see, it's windy, there's dew, there's moisture, and what we're doing is taking lots of frames. And one of the great things about this camera is that it being 8,400 pixels plus across, 7K is only around 7,200, or it's 8,200 pixels across, so 7,400. We're able to make small moves within that, or correct our framing within each of these time lapses, which is great. So we have a little bit of room. We use some motion control devices as well to get a little movement with the camera. But having that little bit of movement natively with that 8,400 pixel wide frame, or 8,200, it's just a lot of pixels, I guess. Yeah. Massive files, but it just shows you the clarity and the detail. We basically went to as many locations as we could, and I was really excited to see the low light capabilities of the camera, but Iceland this time of year has 20 hours of daylight, so that there wasn't a lot of nighttime, so there was a lot of daytime. So we took advantage of that and just went out and tried to find stunning seams and find, you know, locations that would really highlight that dynamic range and really show the D850 in all its glory.
Lucas, can you tell us about your setup? What were you using here along with the D850?
So a lot of these locked off shots, we had 2 cameras. Basically, they showed up in a box, no manual, And that just shows you how seamless this system is from the D810. We're able to go out and within a day have everything dialed. We've got 2 cameras typically on each one of these scenes, just so that we've got 2 different kind of looks, so we could cut between the 2. Sometimes we had a motion control device, but a lot of times it's just a camera on a tripod, locked off, and we're basically setting up at a certain time and letting the camera shoot for multiple hours, sometimes 1,000 frames, sometimes 600 frames. And one thing that really I thought was stunning was the fact that you'll notice there's no flicker. Yeah. Shooting time lapses, back in the day, that was one of the biggest things to try to conquer, was the flicker or the little variation in exposure. This camera really addresses that. They've got not only in the internal time lapses, but the 8K time lapses, they have something called exposure smoothing, which really kind of addresses that. I was absolutely astounded by how clean the files were. I mean, there's post-processing software that can address some of this, but for the most part, the 8K files, I was on aperture priority, shooting, a lot of times at ISO 32, so low 1, which is great because you saw there's a lot of moving water in these frames, and I'm trying to get to that low ISO so I can get these longer exposures. In addition, they've got the silent shutter, which I can't talk enough about from a time-lapse perspective. Yeah. I thought I was going to need lots of batteries because we were shooting. Ask you,
didn't you take a huge bag of batteries?
12 batteries,
12
a dozen batteries. I'm like, we're going to be shooting 18 hours a day. And I thought, I'm going to need every single battery, and it's going to be battery management to get this job done. But with that silent shutter, basically the first frame, the mirror goes up, shutter goes up, and it's basically taking those images with the sensor. And not only is it great for saving the battery, but some of these exposures are 5, 10, 15 seconds long. So there's no shake, and it makes for very, very sharp images as well.
Well, that was incredible footage, like breathtaking. So congrats on that footage. And if people want to see that with the music that you've compiled with it, where can they go?
I think Nikon's got something special. So you'll probably go back to nikonusa.com and find something there.
Excellent, excellent. Steve, there's so many features. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, the time lapse I think is a big deal. Obviously, the 4K UHD is a big deal. But I just wanted to let everybody know also that a lot of those great features that they're used to from previous Nikon cameras are also in the video section of this camera. Things like power aperture, which a lot of people don't realize we have. Now, in filmmaking, obviously, there's the idea of keeping your shutter speed and sometimes your aperture locked in position, but the necessity to change exposure comes about. We have, for instance, auto ISO for video, which will allow you to actually allow the ISO to change automatically from a dark scene to a light scene, or if something's happening in the frame, so that you can maintain shutter and aperture. Or if you want to change your aperture, change the depth of field during an actual shot, we have the power aperture, which will allow you to program a couple of the buttons on the front of the camera that can power open the aperture and close it very seamlessly and steplessly. As all of our cameras do, we offer HDMI output so that you can plug this into an external recording device in case you want to record a higher quality file without compression, which some people will opt to do. And that can also add a monitor in case, like Corey was referencing earlier, in case you're rigging this camera out. You can put a recording device and a monitor on here, external microphone plugs in the side if you want to. So lots of great features.
Well, and both of you are very adventurous photographers, and I'd imagine with time-lapse and things like that, how helpful was the touchscreen or the backlit? I mean, were those important to you guys?
For me personally, the touchscreen is a game changer, and I honestly thought when it came, and I was like, okay, I have the D850, and I've used it a little bit, but this was the first camera that I really embraced that, and it was because a lot of, if you saw the video there, all these shots are shot at a very low angle, so being able to just flip that screen up, and using the focus peaking, I'm able to do a lot without laying in the dirt. And it's a very comfortable angle to get the horizon line set and all of these things, which seem like kind of trivial, but when you get down to it and you come back, and if in the old days you'd be like, Corey's saying, your neck's crooked and you're trying to look, and you come back and there's a time lapse and it's like going downhill, and you're like, oh, I just wasted 4 hours of my life. So the touchscreen is great, as well as for the focus peaking, but also having the autofocus on the back to be able to do a test shot right there to set focus, as well as do a test shot to make sure that we're dialed, everything's good to go. It saves a lot of time. What was yours?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to add that I agree with everything Lucas is saying, but the backlit buttons also are pretty remarkable. I mean, it turns out some of the best imagery, be it still or video, take place in the morning and in the evening, while it's pretty dark. And oftentimes as a photographer or filmmaking, you're getting there in the dark, waiting for that special moment. And it used to be that you'd put a keychain in your mouth with like a little flashlight, or you have a headlamp on, and you're sort of trying to look for the button on the back of the camera, or maybe you have muscle memory and you can kind of remember where those buttons are. But now to have illuminated buttons is incredible.
It seems like a small thing, but they take a lot of pride in Japan over doing that. They really do.
It's big. I mean, it's really
it is big.
It goes back to that idea of whatever makes you have to think less about manipulating the camera and more about what's happening on the other side of the lens. That's what we want, and that's what this camera is delivering.
Yes, I love that. I love hearing that. Well, I would love to actually open it up to the audience at home. Go ahead and go to facebook.com/NikonUSA. We are now going to take your questions. So you're welcome to submit your questions there. Is that okay, you guys, if we take some Q&A?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see who the first victim is here. We've got a question from Mark. Mark, thank you for submitting your question. How's the battery life when shooting in 4K?
It is, a similar experience to what Lucas was describing in shooting time-lapse. Oftentimes you prepare for the worst but hope for the best, and it was the best. You put a battery in, and I could not exhaust the battery. I don't have an exact time.
It's about 70 minutes
of
record time, on a single charge.
And when shooting video, shooting my daughter and my family and friends, I'm not rolling for 70 minutes at a time. It's a minute here, it's 2 minutes there. And so 70 minutes that's a ton of 4K video to edit. Yeah.
What about for you, Lucas? Was that just
same thing? That I was super pleasantly surprised with the battery life. That was one of those things where when you're charging batteries in a car, and it's one of those things where the more you can focus on creativity and what your actual goal is for the assignment or what's in front of you, and the less you have to deal with, data management or dealing with battery charging and things, because you don't want to be in that moment and have the shot just not be there because you don't have a battery but like I said, absolutely amazing. I'd shoot like 1,000 shots and it seemed like the battery had just barely gotten used.
Wow.
Which was
a
huge improvement.
It takes a lot of stress.
And here's one of the other advantages too with the optional MB-D18. If you put a D5 battery in there with an adapter, this can shoot over 5,000 still images in probably around 3 hours of record time also. So again, and it makes it easier also if you've got your camera rigged for the battery to come out the side. For a filmmaker, a lot of times you have, a cage surrounding your camera. It makes it kind of difficult to get to the battery compartment. With this auxiliary battery pack, you could just come out the side like so. But that's another option that'll help extend the record time.
Love it. That's great. Oh no, Lucas got a hold of it.
And I don't know if the engineers were thinking about it, but we are living in this society where we have to shoot vertical video for certain social platforms, and now with this grip, it actually, it sounds, as weird as it sounds, you can actually shoot. You can shoot vertical. No, I'm not. I've seen it. I've seen it. I mean, it's all of a sudden, it's a request we're getting is shoot vertical video
for online.
Of course, absolutely. So you can now shoot great handheld vertical video with the grip.
I never thought I would ever hear you say that.
Isn't that amazing?
I almost feel it's sacrilegious what I'm saying. Right?
Your forte vertical
video.
Awesome. The questions are coming in so fast, you guys. Let's get a question from Sai. Sai says, this camera supports 8K time-lapse video. Can you please comment on it? We kind of touched on that a little bit.
We were talking about it earlier. The 8K time-lapse is something that is created out of camera once you've created the stills, of course. This is just like and one of the best parts about our cameras that we've always had as an interval timer, it was only a few years ago that we introduced a time-lapse movie mode, and the name of this feature was completely different because the function is the same, but the delivery product is different. So the interval timer just basically shoots individual photographs, so you can take advantage of shooting RAW or JPEG or both at the same time. If you've got lots of card space, lots of hard drives, that's the way to go, because this stuff does pile up pretty quickly, as I can attest. I was on a road trip recently, and data management is reaching a new higher level. But the 8K time-lapse, once you've created those stills in the camera and downloaded them to your computer, there are any number of different types of software that can be used that can be applied to creating a movie from those individual still images. And you can export that, of course, at 8K, provided you've got a tough enough computer. And I don't know if you've got an 8K monitor at home, but there's no place else really to watch an 8K video unless you've got one. So.
That's great information, Steve. I actually have a question for you, Lucas.
I was just going to jump in on that.
Yes.
The 8K is phenomenal because you have, like you said, all of these individual still images. But I can't say enough about having the internal 4K. To have an internal 4K file that comes out, is an MOV that you can watch as it's done, basically, put into a timeline. It saves so much time.
You're a family man. We've talked about this. How much both of you...
We're on the road a lot, and if I can save some time, I mean, obviously for maximum flexibility, having, you know, tens of thousands of raw files is wonderful, but for simplicity, the 4K internal time lapses they're absolutely beautiful. And it's a great way to be able to facilitate things in a much more fluid way and get things out quicker.
And I would add, I mean, just the conversation around using the intervalometer and preserving the raw file. I think I just want to point out the obvious. Lucas was in all of these incredible environments where any one frame from that time lapse you'd want to hang on your wall, and that's what the intervalometer is allowing you to do. And I think a parallel to that is when shooting video or still photos, as a parent, you're always debating, should I shoot video or should I shoot stills? And I had this experience today. In fact, I was playing the video that you all just watched, and I wanted to send my mom and dad, who were in the video, a photograph. And so now that it's a 4K video, I went in and did a screen capture, just a screen grab, and I was blown away by the quality of that screen grab from a 4K video. It's sort of, we're entering this era where, in fact, you can shoot video and pull a still. I'm just doing a screen capture on my computer screen, and it's that's an extraordinary moment in time.
That's great.
And the reciprocal. I can shoot a bunch of still pictures and make a movie out of it.
Right. That's right. That's right. And that's exactly right. Yeah.
That is awesome. Question from Huang. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering names, but thank you for your question, Huang. How is the D850 video compared to the D810? What would you guys say?
Of course, the obvious is it's 4K, 4K full frame, which is, I just want to scream that out. It's 4K.
Do it, Corey.
I mean,
Stand up, let it out.
But it's also one of the other things I noticed immediately. I shot in my home, and homes tend to be pretty dark. It handles low light so much better. I mean, it's just the ISO sensitivity in 4K it's a huge step forward. And Steve, you could probably speak to the technical, what can it do in low light, but it was instantly noted. There were moments that I would not have used my D810 that the D850 was incredible.
Would you say that as well, Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, the dynamic range out of this thing, and I know that they've said it's similar in dynamic range to the 810, but I don't know. Like, I feel like the color is so much better, and I was pulling things out of shadows when I was looking at the still images, and it was just absolutely amazing at how clear and concise every image was. It was like one of those things, like, that's how I saw it. That's how I remember it.
Wow.
And that's what really blew me away.
That's awesome. Real quick, Steve, what would you say is the biggest step up?
Well, it is about the same dynamic range as the 810, but you got to understand we're 10 megapixels higher in resolution too. So to maintain the same great level of dynamic range with an even higher resolution sensor too is quite a challenge. But This is, you know, it's a Nikon designed sensor. I know our guys work very hard at making sure that they get the most out of this. And of course, every generation of camera progresses. They make lots of little tweaks to the X-Speed 5 image processing engine also, which can all touch on all these things these guys have talked about for sure.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Okay, let's keep going here. Question from Baba Tunde. He says, what is the bit rate for 4K video on the D850?
144 megabits per second.
Boom.
See, just pulled that out of my
That's
back
right,
pocket
just
there.
like that. Let's keep going. Let's just hammer Steve with all these number questions.
Trying to make it more technical.
That's right. Let me see
You're
here.
giving him an easy one.
Ask these guys
The
a
automatic
question.
look this way.
Yeah.
That's right. Pass it on down. Question from Brad. Brad says, can you use the same battery as the Nikon D810?
Yes, you can.
Yes. Nice. I like these one-word answers.
Yes.
Okay, let's keep going.
We have a new battery that works, that comes with this camera,
Okay.
the EN-EL15A, but you can use the regular EN-EL15 battery in this camera as well. So
Lucas and I were
they're
joking.
interchangeable.
We were joking that, you know, we're about to sell all of our old cameras, but we're going to keep the
Keep the
batteries.
I
We're
love
selling our
that.
D810s.
well.
And the chargers too. That's
Yeah.
you can't even put a value on having like all the same chargers on a job. It's amazing.
Oh, I bet. Okay, let's keep going. You guys are doing great. Question from Clifford. Clifford asks, how many minutes of 4K video can you shoot per single file? And any difference in storing video file to XQD versus SD card? Boom, there's a tough one.
Well, we're at that stage where the SD card is about as fast. Maybe the XQD's got a slight edge on it, but XQD is there's a lot of potential there. So that card is going to get faster and faster as the days and years go by, of course. But in terms of being able to handle everything that can be thrown at this camera, if you consider that the 4K UHD is not a problem for either of the memory cards in this camera. And at 144 megabits per second, you could record to the SD just as well as you could the XQD. On the still photography side too, we talk about the depth of the buffer in this camera. It'll hold 51 14-bit NEF images before it has to clear the buffer. That's a pretty deep buffer to begin with, but it's entirely possible that you can go way beyond that just because of the very fast write speed of this camera also. Now, in terms of the beginning of his question was how big a file for 4K.
how many minutes?
How many
4K
minutes?
Video?
You can actually record up to 29 minutes, 59 seconds. But we utilize what's called file break in this camera, where every 4 gigabytes the file is broken up. So at that full 2959 would give you about 8 clips, all 4 gigabytes in size.
Wow.
Now, and then all you would have to do is just simply download those and drop them onto a timeline, and they match up frame to frame from one clip to the next. So that's basically because of the file system. It makes it easy to put those pieces together, and it's as if it were one piece ultimately.
Awesome. Great information. We're getting down to about 3 minutes, so I wanted to, let's give you a couple more questions here. Question from Devesh. How good is its performance at high ISOs? You two guys, Lucas and Corey, what do you think?
Maybe I sort of addressed that a bit in saying that I immediately recognized I could shoot in lower light situations, and the video files looked extraordinary, but you shot in really low light
What do
still
you think,
photos.
Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, we were shooting stars and you saw the moon, and it was super clean. Like, I would say it's a huge advance. The high ISO, I was shooting 6400 a lot at night, and it would look beautiful. I unfortunately only had the camera for a short amount of time. I wish that Nikon would let me have one a little bit longer, but it was absolutely amazing. So
Hint, hint.
hint, hint.
Awesome. Here's a question from Chris. Chris says, when shooting in silent/live mode, does that mean you won't wear out the mirror and shutter when shooting tons of images to create the time lapse?
Yeah, not only in the live view silent mode, which is strictly silent. It basically locks up the mirror, opens the mechanical shutter, and uses the shutter on the sensor. The same is true when you're doing time-lapse, and I know for those of you who tuned in earlier for the still photography section, that's the same option that's available in focus shift mode also. And all of these modes will help not only save battery power, but wear and tear on the shutter ultimately. It's a big deal, definitely.
Excellent, excellent. 20 seconds to each of you. What's your bit of advice? You've got this incredible machine, the D850. What's your advice to filmmakers out there, you guys?
You know, I think my advice is, this is a fantastic camera, totally empowers the user, but still the most important piece is you've just got to have the camera in your hands and you've got to shoot. You can talk about it, you can read about it, you can read the manual, but you've just got to shoot. Just press that record button and point the camera at the things that you care about. And that's the fun part.
I love that. What would you say, Lucas?
I'd second that. There's no second for going out and just actually shooting. And even when the weather is bad, there were times when, for instance, in Iceland, where it looked like it was going to pour rain. All of a sudden, the sun comes out, the clouds are moving. So just going out and having a sealed body and this whole package that allows you to do all these things, it's kind of a content machine.
Wow, I love it. Steve, Lucas, Corey, thank you all so much for your information. Steve, you've wowed me with your amazing recollection of numbers, but thank you so much. And also thank you guys for putting those projects together so each of us can see what this Nikon D850 can really do, and your projects were phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
A special thanks to you guys for submitting your questions, and also to the Nikon team, thank you so much for all your hard work, for giving us a really great tool to work with. Without further ado, thank you guys so much for being here, and thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you check in with your Nikon retailers. They've got some great information for you. They can answer all your questions. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.